everybody, today we're going to be making this super fun Czech glass earring with some Swarovski crystals and fire polish and some seed beads. First I'm going to turn the baby loom over here, and that's the one I'm using today, and I'm going to wrap my hemp around the knob on the back of it. I'm going to tie that into 2 knots just to make sure it's good and secure, and then I'm going to start by pulling it over the top of the loom and in about the same place on the other side. And then I'm going to wrap it around the knob on the back again, and I'm going to count 3 spaces between, go across, same thing, count 3 spaces. And that what I'm showing there is that you need 3 spaces between to put the beads, but you're going to need 4 cords. So anytime you loom, you always want to make sure that for the amount of beads that you have, you always have 1 extra thread. So I'm just laying it in here, counting 2, 3, and pulling it across. And then I have my cords in place. And I'm going to wrap it again around the back, bring it up over the top, count 3, and same thing on the other side. Then we're going to turn that over and we're going to wrap the hemp around the knob again, twice, and then I'm going to trim that hemp. And you want to make sure you leave enough room there so you can tie it off. And I'm just going to tie it to that other string, and I'm going to keep tension there with my finger laying on top of the hemp and just tie 2 knots. And so we have now our warps are ready to go. We're going to use these 5mm fire polish, some 11O seed beads in 2 different colors, in the ruby cyan, and then we're going to be using the blue beads are actually in teal, rainbow teal. So those are super pretty, and you can always check out the description to head over to the Jewel Loom website to pick those up. And these are also the ruby cyan in 8O. So that's basically what you're going to need for those. You're going to need some head pins, some ribbon crimp ends, and some 4mm Austrian crystals, or your choice of bicone there. So I'm just showing you here everything together so you can see how it coordinates. And I just decided that that pop of green would just be super cute with all of the other colors, with the blue and the pinks. And there's my wildfire, and I'm going to give myself about a wingspan of wildfire. I'm just using white here. I'm just going to pinch the end of my wildfire with my pliers there, and it flattens it out a little bit. And it just makes it easier to go ahead and thread your needle on. It gives you a flat area, and your needle slides nicely right onto it. So we're all threaded up, and I'm just going to take on this farthest to the left warp. I'm just going to tie the end of my wildfire about approximately in the middle area there, because I want to have enough thread on either end, so when I'm ready to tie off I can without a problem. So I'm just showing here that with the project it's a pretty long earring, but giving some pointers there as to using a shorter ear wire if you want to shorten them up, or of course you could use less beads if so desired. So I'm just picking up 9 seed beads, the 11Os, and I'm dropping those beads down, and those are going to be the beads that go underneath the ribbon crimp. So we're going to do, as we drop those beads down on the thread, I'm just going to feed the needle underneath the warps and push the beads up through, and I'm dividing 3 in each column of warps there. And then I'm just going to sew over the top of the warps and through the beads. You always have to make sure and remember to be over top of the warps, so that way then all your beads will stay in place and not drop out for you. And I'm just going to pick up 9 more of those. Again, I'm showing that that's what your ribbon crimp's going to go on top of. And you can always decide, you can always just hook your ribbon crimps right into the hemp, but the seed beads do make it a nicer way to attach it. And I just push those up through, went across the top, and I'm just going to straighten those out because that's my base that I'm going to start all of my other beads on top of. So I want it to be exactly where I want it. And I'm going to pick up 3 of my 5mm fire polish beads. Do the same thing, I'm dropping those down and then running my wildfire needle underneath the warps and then going up over the top, over the warps, in through the fire polish and across, and just make sure that that's pulled snug. You don't want to pull too tight, but it just pulls snug for you. So now we're going to go in after our fire polish. We're going to go in with our 8/0 seed beads, and we're going to pick 6 of those up and do the same thing. We're going to push those up, drop them down on our wildfire, push them up underneath the bottom, and then run the needle over top of the warps. And then I'm going to pick up my bicones. I'm going to pick up 3 bicones. And I'm going to drop those down as well. And that's going to give us a really pretty look. I push those up through, and I'm going to run my needle across, through, over the warps, through the bicones, and then onto a row of 5mm fire polish again. And we're just going to keep up with this pattern. I'll do some more 8/0s. And again, going over top of those warps. A good tip is to make sure you see your needle through between the beads when you're doing that. So then that way you know that if you're seeing your needle, it's not underneath the warps. And another row of bicones. I'm just getting those in place, and I'm going to run my needle through.
I never stop to see you cry. I never listen to your tears and praise. Oh no, I never stop to see you try. I never listen to the words you say.
And those are locked in now. And we're just continuing here with our pattern. And you see how I'm holding my finger underneath them as I'm putting that needle over the top of the warps and through the beads. It keeps them elevated up through the hemp, and that way then it makes your needle a lot easier to go through. So now we're going to add our 11/0s above our fire polish, and that's going to be where we put our ribbon crimps on the end. And I'm just discussing here, you know, being able to put the ribbon crimp on and having those seed beads there to put the ribbon crimp over top of. And again, I am adding 9 of those, and we're going to put 3 in each one of the warp lanes or widths of warps there. And I'm just pushing them up through, and I'm going to take my needle across to lock those in.
I never stop to see you cry. I never listen to your tears and praise. Oh no, I never stop to see you try. I never listen to the words you say. Oh no, I never look your eyes of sorrow. I never listen to your cries of pain. You give your loving, I don't care. I'm sometimes foolish and so vain. Oh no, I never told you that I love you. When all you did, you took from me. But honey, if you ever leave me, I'll never make it okay. Oh no, oh no. Oh no. I never leave you waiting. I never ever let you go. Oh no, I never care about the rain. So forgive me if I can say yeah.
So now that we have finished our last row, I'm going to put the needle inside of that end warp, and I'm going to knot around it. And I'm going to put 2 knots, and keep in mind, guys, you can always use some GS Hypo cement or any kind of glue. Once you get these knots tied, you can put the GS Hypo cement on it just to kind of secure them so they don't come loose and seaweeds come out or don't hold well into your ribbon crimp. So here now I'm going to take my cord cutters and just trim away the wildfire thread, the remaining of it. Those are always good to have, the cord cutters. They're excellent to cut the wildfire with. So now we are going to get ready to cut the hemp and take the project off of the baby loom. And you can see I'm kind of holding those threads with my fingers just to make sure we don't get too much recoiling. One thing about this baby loom is you don't have as much recoiling on the loom as you do on the original because you're not using a bar in it for tension when you're setting everything up. So I'm just going to take 2 threads here, and I'm going to take both of them and tie them into a knot to secure all of my beads and everything. This is going to be also hidden underneath the ribbon crimp. And I'm just making that nice and making sure that's nice and centered and nice and secure there. And I'm just going to do that with all of the strings that are hanging there and just get some nice knots on there. And again, then whenever you are trimming those, you can also put some glue on those knots as well to secure things.
stop to see you cry. I never listen to your cheers and praise. Oh no, I never stop to see you try. I never listen to the words you say. Oh no, I never look your eyes of sorrow. I never listen to your cries of pain. You get the loving, I don't care. I'm sometimes foolish and so vain. Oh no, I never told you that I love you.
So now that we have all of the knots tied, I'm just going to go in with my cord cutters and trim those away. And don't forget, you can always put glue on those, which I believe I will be doing here shortly. And once I get them trimmed, I'll just put the glue on the ends of each knot. And the glue that I'm going to use here is the Super Glue Loctite glue. I like it just as much as GS Hypo, if not more. And I'm just putting a little bit on each end of the phrase, like where the thread has been cut from the knot. Then I'm just going to pick up my pliers here. These are my flat nose. Put my ribbon crimp into my flat nose pliers. And I'm going to put this over the end of the knots up into the seed beads. Now, if you wanted to, you can also push it up further and go over top of the seed beads. But I like the way that this is sitting now, so that's how I'm going to squeeze my crimp on there. And you just want to work back and forth with your ribbon crimps. You just want to squeeze slightly on one side, squeeze slightly on the other side, just go back and forth to make sure everything is even. And you don't want to bear down on it too much, because it will make your ribbon crimp warped, and you don't want that. So we're going to do the same exact thing on this side. Just put a little bit of the Loctite, Super Glue Loctite gel on here, and then add our ribbon crimp. And all I'm doing here, guys, I was just pushing the sides of those knots in, because if not, they're going to push out the sides of your ribbon crimp. You can see here I'm just taking a head pin and I'm just pushing the knot down in there so it doesn't have to, you know, stick out and look not as pretty. But I'm just pushing that down in there a little bit before I do the final crimp down on this side. And now we're just going to use a head pin. This is about a 20 gauge head pin. And I'm just going to put on some seed beads in the pattern that I like. You can do this any way you would like. You could also add the fire polish or the crystals onto the bottom as well. And I'm just loading those beads on. And I'm just having my middle one be slightly longer than the other two, just to kind of give it some interest. And I'm just going to use my 1-step looper and put the head pin in there, and then give it a squeeze. And you always want to back off a little bit to make sure that it does not crush your bead. So what I mean by that is, see how I'm putting my fingernail in there between where the one-step looper ends and my beads and my pin begin? That's just giving it a little bit of breathing room so my beads don't get crushed when I close that. So now I'm opening up my jump ring. This is about an 8mm jump ring, and I'm going to put the pins on that I've made with the beads. And these are going to be the dangles on the bottom, as you can see in the other earring. And I've put those on in the order I wanted them, and now I'm just going to hook it onto the bottom of the ribbon crimp and just take my pliers and close those. Make sure to always close your jump rings from front to back, guys. And now we're just gonna put on our ear wire, or here, this is a post fixture that I'm going to use on here. And again, I'm opening my jump ring from front to back. Don't ever pull your jump rings side to side, guys, because it'll warp them and you will not be able to use them and get them back into the original position. And I'm just hooking on to the other ribbon crimp on the top. And that is it, guys. This is our completed pair of earrings that we've made with our Czech glass. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.